everyone, Robbie here, and welcome back to the Coach's Journey podcast. This is episode 18, and hopefully this will be fun, as much fun for you as it was for me. This episode is another one that just features me, no guest, although there will be an awesome episode with a guest coming next week with Chris Joseph. But yeah, no guest this time, but also no content from the past, which has been what some of those previous episodes featuring me have been. This is all new content. It was kind of fun to make and kind of hard work, doing a 90-minute monologue by yourself. It turns out takes it out of me. But it's not just new content, it includes some exciting announcements. But I tried to pack them in alongside some insights and stories that I haven't shared before, particularly from my experience of creating new ways of working with people in my coaching business. I'll start off by diving into the Coach's Journey group program, where that came from, how and why I created it. And that's kind of in some ways, that's the first half of the episode is about that, the lessons I've learned from it, but also the lessons I've learned from my two other group coaching experiments, the Pioneering Women Program and the Genius Accelerator. It includes what I learned, particularly from Rich Litvin, about how we start group programs, how we can sell them. And that's a question I sometimes get asked about, and that none of the previous content I've released really addresses. So hopefully there's a bunch of things in there that you can use to create far more successful group programs than I have created. I would say I'm a moderately successful group coaching program runner. Then I also get into, and it's worth saying this now because I don't think I say it that clearly the first time I bring it up. When I was creating some new one-on-one engagements this autumn, I got into the way and how I make decisions about whether I'm going to create something new for my business. And it turned out there are 4 criteria for that, which get me to the point of, am I going to do this or not? And I'll say them now, and then we'll come back to them throughout the episode. But they are, do I love this new way of working, or will I love it? Does it meet a need in the world that I can see or feel? Is it good for my business, and is it good for my life more broadly? And if the answer to all those things is yes, then maybe I'll make the thing. And that in some ways comes from, so there's a nice distinction that's in the Prosperous Coach that Rich Litvin uses a lot. Is it a hell yes or a hell no? But I'd always struggled with that, perhaps because I'm indecisive, or perhaps because I'm not kind of hell yes person some of the time. And at one of Rich's intensives that I went to, a woman called Kendra Kunyov said, actually I don't know if that's how you pronounce her second name, but Kendra Kunyov, how do we make this a hell yes? And essentially the way that I make bits of work a hell yes is if it answers all those 4 questions. Do I love it? Does it meet a need I can see or feel in the world? Is it good for my life? And is it good for my business? So we'll get into those criteria, how I use them, why they're true of the different bits of work that I use, and you might be able to use those criteria too. We hit a couple of other things like what it feels like when your generosity doesn't feel like it's paying back and what to do with that. The fact that I've taken one of my group programs quietly offline and why I did that. And then the exciting bit, in some ways, the most exciting bit for me is, why, first of all, I'll explain why I'm not running the Coach's Journey group program in its normal slot in 2021, which is exciting for me because we're having a baby. And secondly, that's a part of why I'm launching the new Coach's Journey community. And I'll explain how that works, what it means from about an hour in. And because I'm not running the group program next year, if you want to work with me in the next 6 months or a year, probably the best way is to join the Coach's Journey community. And I've made that in a way that I think will really support the coaches that join it. Wrapped up in there is also there's now the opportunity to support the Coach's Journey podcast. If you're the kind of person who loves what I'm doing, wants it to continue, wants to support financially in some way, but doesn't particularly want to join a community for coaches, then that opportunity is there too. And in this episode, it's worth saying before we dive in that the energy of not having someone else there is really different for a full episode length. And you're going to hear it where I start to struggle for dates and years and get some of them wrong, and I put some breaks in there so that I could go and get a glass of water and recover and that kind of thing. And also what this means is there may be some bits that I may not be being super clear for you. And I think I am, but there's no one who's watching me who I have to check if they look bleary-eyed or not. And also there's no one who's asking me clarifying questions. So definite invitation, even more than usual. If you've got any questions about this, send them in. I'll answer them in a future episode maybe, or something like that, whether that's about group programs or group coaching work or how to create new ways of working in your business. By all means, send them in. And I'll definitely get to them. You can hear the energy being a bit weird, because this is weird. This bit about halfway through where I mentioned that I've referenced Jordan Peterson already in the interview, but it's not an interview, it's just me talking, and I haven't actually mentioned him before. That's not because I've cut something badly, it's just because I do mention one of his ideas, which is understanding as a human that you could do something and then deciding if you would, but I don't name check him at that point. If you're surprised that I'm talking about Jordan Peterson because you think he's the Antichrist or something like that, then check out my article, Jordan Peterson is Not Evil and Why It Matters, which I'll link to in the show notes. But I couldn't edit the bit out with the mention that I had mentioned him before earlier, so I left it in because, as you can hear from this bit, part of what this podcast is about is being a bit rough around the edges, and that's fine with me. So look, I hope that if you're listening to this, and you might already be getting excited about the idea of the Coach's Journey community or supporting the podcast in that way, and my wider work for coaches, if you are, you can go to patreon.com/The Coach's Journey. You can go to thecoachesjourney.com and press the support button in the top right. There'll be a community page there at some point as well that explains it, but there's various bits there that get into the details of how it works, as I will in the last part of this episode. But also there's a little video of me explaining it if you want to cut to the chase of that and find out about it soon, because there will be a first community call in November. And I'm excited about that, and I hope that you will be too when it gets to that. But that's just part of this episode. There's loads more to come before that. In particular, I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about how I created the Coach's Journey group program, which is the first part of this work of mine for coaches. And so, without further ado, I'll hand over to me. So about 3.5 years ago, I was sitting in the Royal Festival Hall, and a client of mine, I think, texted to say she wasn't coming. She may have just not shown up. I remember the client. Obviously, I won't name her. Really wonderful woman. Loved working with her. But one time, at least once, she didn't show up. And as I was trying to manage my, like my inner critic or something at the time. So I used to get really annoyed when people didn't show up. For coaching sessions. They stood me up one way or another, and I used to take it personally. And so what I decided to do was reframe. Like, every time someone didn't show up, I would do something cool. And sometimes it was something for me. That's quite often what I do these days. It's like, what do I most need in this moment? And I'll go off and do it if someone cancels. But then it was like, I'll do some cool work. And what I decided to do this time that this particular client cancelled was I would sit and write an article about how I'd got to the point where I could leave my job, which had been in a wonderful leadership development program, less than 2 years after starting my coaching training. So about a year after I'd finished, I had a business which was viable for me to leave that work. And I banged it out, basically, sitting in the Royal Festival Hall members area, facing out towards the Millennium Eye and Westminster, and almost got it done in the time that I had set aside for that coaching session, which was probably 90 minutes or 2 hours. It's not quite true to say it was all done. And I did a bunch of editing after that in all kinds of ways. But essentially, that's when I wrote that article. And then a surprising thing happened for me, which is that it got read a lot. And I just checked. In fact, I'm going to get it up now. So this was in May 2017. Here we are in October 2020. It's on LinkedIn. The original post on LinkedIn has got 8,631 article views, 370 reactions, 143 comments, and 42 reshares. And that is by far and away the most read article that I have written, and I've now got over 200 posts on LinkedIn, just hit the 200th the other day. But it was also then picked up by EverCoach. They featured it on their blog. It's also been on my website and thecoachesjourney.com as well. So it's probably had 10,000 article views over those different places. And that's kind of amazing. It's like a mini viral hit, right? And for me, that was a big deal. Like I said, it's still the most viewed thing that I've made. It's like there's some really funny things on the analytics on LinkedIn, like the most views are actually not from London, according to this, although this can't be right, but from the Antwerp area in Belgium. So whoever it is in Antwerp that has looked at that article, thank you. That's really fun for me. So I made this. I wrote this article. It went out there. I shared it in a few places, like the ICF group, and I think that's where it picked up a lot of momentum. And then once people start sharing it, it's really beautiful that it goes places. I learned a few things from that. I learned that it does help to give something a clickbaity title, because I called it "How I Became a Full-Time Coach Less Than 2 Years After Starting My Training." And hopefully in the article I tried to kind of name check that, really, and say, look, I know I'm doing this, but it's too good an opportunity. Like making up a kind of crappy clickbaity title when you don't have an article worthy of it or a story worthy of it, that's annoying, right? When you end up on a page and you're just scrolling through adverts. If you've actually got something to say, then that's a decent thing to do, and it's just a way of helping people find really interesting work. And all those comments, so many of them were so lovely, and so many people said the article had been really valuable to them. And what happened on the back of that was quite interesting, because one of the things I said I did was have a load of conversations with coaches who are further down the road than me. And essentially that actual thing, having those conversations, is why I ended up creating the podcast, because they were so formative for me. I mentioned some of the people in that article, a woman called Isabel, who else was it? Am I totally escaping me at the moment? Isabel's one was really formative, but there were a bunch of other coaches who really helped me at that time, including, of course, Phil, who's been on the podcast, and Mike Toller from the coaching school, Vegard Olsen from Coaching Partner, who is another person who was a real mentor to me in that early stage, one of the trainers on the program that I did. Anyway, a bunch of people started reaching out to me who was saying, can I catch up and talk to you about coaching? And I would say yes, because, why not? And then what was really interesting was I loved those conversations. I was doing some work with my coach at the time, Joel Monk, about the Zone of Genius. I think Joel had just read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, great book, and we'll probably come back to the Zone of Genius later on. And Joel had me answer the questions from The Big Leap that Gay Hendricks gives to help us articulate our unique ability. So the idea of the Zone of Genius is that what if there's a sweet spot where the unique gifts we have, all the experience we have, everything we do naturally and love to do meet? And what if that's also the place where we can create the most abundance and satisfaction with the least amount of time spent? And the closer and closer we get to that, the more impact we can have in the world, and the more successful we can be along whatever lines of success are important to us. And what I sometimes say to people about the idea of the Zone of Genius is, whether you like it, whether it exists or not, it's a really useful thought experiment to ask ourselves, to say, if this was true for me, that the things that I love the most and am uniquely gifted at in the world match up with the world's needs in such a way that I can create more abundance from doing this thing that I love and am great at than anything else, what would that be? And that's a great thing to set your creativity on. There's some beautiful questions in that book, which Joel sent to me and I answered. And one of them is, I can't remember the exact details now actually, but it's something like, what could you do, like what do you love most to do? Like what work do you do that doesn't feel like work? What could you spend all day doing and you wouldn't get tired and bored? And I'd just come off this beautiful conversation with a coach who was slightly less experienced than me, and she was just totally energized by it. And I was like, I could have had that conversation with her all day. And that was the beginning of the Coach's Journey group program. Because that was the point where I was like, I love talking to coaches about coaching. Then a little later on, I signed up for a group coaching program with Rich Litvin. And he's an amazing coach, author of the book, The Prosperous Coach. And one of the great things about receiving coaching, I wrote an article about 6 reasons, that you should hire a coach if you're a coach, and that's the most important thing you can do for your coaching business. And one of the reasons for that is you can see how other people work. And when you see how other people do things, you get this great thing. You realize, I could do that. And then you get to choose. I could do that. Would I do it? Will I do it? Should I do it? And doing the group program with Rich, it's really hard for me not to do that and think, yeah, I could have a group program for coaches. And then it starts, right? I love having conversations with coaches. What if I had a few of them and they paid me money? And it was as powerful for them as this group program with Rich is for me. And then that means we're probably at stage 2 of the program. Now, it took me a while to get going on that. I had to get through some resistance about working with coaches. There's a sense that there's too many people selling to coaches. A bunch of them look a bit too shiny to me and a bit sleazy salesperson. I get loads these days of LinkedIn requests from people who want to sell to coaches. I had a lot of do I want to do that? Isn't every coach selling to coaches? And then during that work with Rich, I realized, no, not everyone is, and not everyone wants to, but I actually quite do. I love the craft of coaching, and I would love to support coaches. And so then I had a few things. So I had this thing that I think maybe I love to do, which is have conversations with coaches about coaching and their businesses. And that might be a part of my zone of genius, or I might be able to get into my zone of genius by doing that. And then I've got this article, which kind of showed me that there was a real desire, for some reason, for what I had to say about coaching. Thousands of people had clicked on that article, read it, shared it, all these kinds of things. So despite what felt to me like a crowded market of people selling to coaches, some people liked what I had to say. So there's some kind of need there from coaches for support of the kind that I might be able to offer for growing their businesses, living life as a coach. And then I had to decide, do I want to do this? And there was this other possibility, of course. Part of it was, how do I want to work with coaches? Do I want to work with them one-on-one? What else could I do? What future might be unlocked, I guess, by having a group program for coaches. And, there are some things to be said about group programs. They make working with a coach more affordable, usually, because the price of a group program tends to be less than the price of one-on-one work. So they kind of provide my business with that, which as my fees for one-on-one work were creeping up, I was kind of aware might be pricing out more coaches who I might love to work with from working with me one-on-one. And there's also a sense that they then become clients. And once you've worked with someone, they might work with you again. They might refer other people to you. And that is kind of useful too. One of the things that Rich said to me is, group people that have done his groups always come back or go on to do something else with him. And that was true of me. I went to one of his intensives in LA after I'd done that program with, or during the time that I was doing that program. Of course, I bought his book and sent lots and lots of people his way. So there was that sense too. And I think that probably then got me to the main stumbling block I then had with this group program. And here's some thoughts now about starting group programs, was how do I go about this? If I wanted to do this, what do I do? And this is another reason why doing a group program is useful, because I happen to be speaking to Minor Arias, who's a guest on, I think, episode 3 of the podcast. And Minor is a Costa Rican coach, amazing man. It's a beautiful conversation that we have in that podcast episode. And bizarrely, when I started this program with Rich's coaching salon, I moved from southwest London, where I happen to live, kind of a mile away, maybe from someone in the group, to Costa Rica because of my wife's work for a few months. I stayed out there, just a few miles away from where Minor lived in Escazú, on the outskirts of San Jose, Costa Rica. So I think it was a conversation that Minor and I had out there, and he explained how he had a group program. And it turned out he just used the prosperous coach approach, which is how I built my business, invitation and referral, to create a group program. And it was just so obvious then. Oh, of course. Well, I just invite a load of people into some calls where I gift them an experience of my coaching, and then trust, give them the absolute best experience I can, and then trust that some of them will become members of the group. And it's like, once he'd said that, it's like, oh, it's so obvious. Why wouldn't I do it like that? Perfect. But first, I was in this place of working on the zone of genius, of saying no to things so I could say yes to other things. I was playing with Warren Buffett's 5 things, 25 things lists game, which is where you make a list of all the things you want to do, and then you narrow it down to the 5, and then the other 20, they have to become your don't touch with a barge pole list. Otherwise, they are the things that really get in the way of us doing the top 5 things. So what I did first to really experiment was, I was like, I love having conversations with coaches, but would running a group program for coaches be something that I would absolutely love to do? And so what I did was, as the starting point, but also as a way, I kind of knew that if I did go ahead, this would be useful. I invited, I think, like a bunch of the coaches that I knew to come to some group calls, and around 2 test calls for the coach's journey, where I got a bunch of coaches on them. I think there's like 4 or 5 on one, 7 or 8 on another. Some of them were the same people. And I gifted them an experience so that I could find out if I wanted to run a group program. Did I love doing group coaching with coaches in the way that I thought I might? And of course, I borrowed loads from Rich, an absolute master at group coaching. And we did those, and I did them from Costa Rica in autumn 2017. And my memory of them is one of them was good and the other one was a bit less good, and one of them felt kind of good and one of them felt really nervy. But between them, I kind of knew after I'd done that there was enough excitement there that I would do some more. So I procrastinated on a little bit, but in the end then I did what I said I would do. I did put it out publicly, but mostly I just sent out a whole load of invitations to fill out a bunch of intro calls for that program. And yeah, a lot of those people I invited were, coaches that I knew, people I trained with. I'd also helped out on a couple of other coach training courses. There were some people from that. And there were a load of people who'd kind of contacted me, added me on LinkedIn. I'd had conversations with on the back of that article. And from that, I got 2 coaches, amazing coaches, who joined that first year of the coach's journey. Essentially, that's the method of enrollment that I then used for the 2nd and 3rd years, inviting as many people as coaches as I could think of who I'd connected with in the previous year or previously to that, onto intro calls, getting them into that space where they could experience group coaching with me, connect with other coaches, and then went from there. And that essentially gives us the enrollment process for the coach's journey. It gives us how I started my group coaching program, although there may be loads of questions about that, and feel free, of course, to ask them wherever you're reading this or send them to me, and I can either answer them or do another video. And it also starts to unpack what really are the kind of, I've mentioned 3 of them, and I'll tell you what they are in a sec, but there are really 4 now that I think about criteria for deciding whether to do something new in my business. And I'll get onto those in a sec. What I'm realizing as I make a podcast episode by myself is that I'm kind of out of breath. And I need to pause this to give myself a chance to edit and break things, but also to have a drink of water, to take a breath, and then I'm going to talk about those 4 criteria that I think about these days. I'm going to talk about a couple more group programs, that one-on-one piece of work that I've just started this autumn, which really got me thinking about how I think about new work, and then the ways that you can support the Coach's Journey podcast and my other work going forward, and or join the Coach's Journey community, which is another piece of new work that I will tell you about shortly. So it's actually worth first talking about the other 2 group programs that I have run in one case and tried to run in another and failed. Because they probably pick off the last piece of insight or wisdom or advice that I have about group coaching programs. And it came from Rich as well. My friend Kristen, who was also a guest on the podcast, she was talking to Rich in one of the calls about this, and he gave this piece of advice. Like, you start a group, if you don't have the group ready to go, you start the group program when the first person signs up, and then the next person joins when they're ready, and then the next person, and then the next person, and have rolling entry. And that struck me as more sustainable for me if I wanted to have more than one group program, because it's quite a lot of work I was finding, especially each of the 3 years that I've run the Coach's Journey group program, there's been quite a lot of work. In fact, coaches on this year's program two of them were kind of freaked out by the idea that I'd sent 40 invitations in 1 week as part of that enrollment. Now, I think that was in the first year, but that's like, if you want to enroll in the way that I do and you want to fill 4 or 5 intro calls with coaches, you can't just send 2 invitations, right? So yeah, absolutely. I sent 40 odd in 1 week, 1 year, and probably comparable numbers in the other years. It's just a chance to reach out, and it's a really nice thing to invite people into, and a beautiful gift to send that, in my view. But for people who are like, the idea of sending an invitation to someone is really high energy, then obviously that sounds a bit scary. But even with the ability to do that, I realized that, like, if I had to do that, that was quite a lot of work over a 6-week period, probably a little more on the enrollment process, and I wasn't sure that I had the energy to enroll in that way for another group program each year. So with both of the other 2 group programs that I've publicized, launched over the last few years, I decided to try Rich's rolling entry piece, which is, when the first person signs up, you start the program. Then when the next person comes along into my orbit, start that program. They join the group with the first person, and then a third person joins whenever, and you keep going like that. And then at some point, the first person leaves, and it's just people 2 and 3, and on you go. Now, in practice, I haven't actually, despite having launched 2 programs like that, I've never actually run the group in that way. So I tried a few things. So the first group program I launched after the Coach's Journey was the Pioneering Women program. And that was a group that I was just so inspired to create. And it happened because I just saw this pattern, which was, I think I had 3 clients, maybe 4, all women in their, older than 27, let's say, younger than 35, and just the intensity of the challenge for women in that period in their life. I've seen it also with, my wife and other friends and family as well. It's just so much. Again, I don't know why I'm referencing Peterson so much in this interview, but he says a beautiful thing about this. He says, there's this thing where women suddenly have to get their whole life in order in the space of about 2 years. And that when he was a practicing, again, this is Jordan Peterson, when he was a practicing psychologist, he would regularly get high-flying female clients in around that age group who, it was a really difficult period. And I've continued to see that in different ways. And I just thought it would be an amazing, I would have loved to have got, when I had those 3 or 4 people at once, I was having separate one-on-one conversations with them. I would have loved to have got them in a room together so they could see that it wasn't just them, that it was a challenge, and they could feed off each other's courage and wisdom and, intelligence and all those kinds of things. And I didn't do that at that time. I didn't even have the kind of courage or the I wasn't empowered by myself to create programs. I probably would do it now. I'd invite all those people just into an afternoon one day. But what I realized was I could create that anyway because it was later, because it was such an important thing. And the way I tried to do that was this. I decided to set aside 1 slot every week. I think it was every week. Every Friday morning, I would just hold that slot, and I invited a bunch of interesting people women who would fit into that group to just have a gift of a coaching conversation. And this is like, do I love this work as much as I think I will? So I'm asking that question at this point. And am I getting in my zone of genius? And is there really a need? And it was close. In the end, what I ended up doing was I got the first person for the group and did an amazing 6 months of work with her, and I absolutely loved it. I never got the second person. And I had some really close calls. So I had someone who would have been the second person, but she actually got pregnant, and so it just felt like the wrong time. I had someone else who later became a client, again, who could have been a client at that point, and a great member for that group. And there were a couple of other, I think, close calls as well, maybe, but those two in particular stick in mind. And what I realized was, that program, to get it rolling, would have taken me just more energy than I ever felt like I had to give to it. So if I had upped the number of invitations, the number of gifted sessions that I was giving away, all these kind of things, I think that I could have got that program rolling. And once it was rolling, it would have been a different thing, giving me more energy in that way. But, as I was playing with my priorities at that time, putting in an enormous amount of work into that just didn't ever feel like quite the right thing for me. So in the end, particularly when I launched the next group program that I'll talk about, I quietly removed that from the website. And look, here's a lesson, right? I didn't, until now, post on LinkedIn. I posted on LinkedIn. There's a little article, you can read it on my website or on LinkedIn, about the Pioneering Women program, why I was setting it up. I didn't put a big post up when I stopped it. I'm not sure why that was. It just didn't feel like the right thing to do. I didn't think it was because I was trying to hide anything particularly here. As you can hear, I'm happy to talk about it. But I didn't do that. And so it's really important that you know that, right? That we all announce the big, shiny things, and we rarely talk about the slightly messy, dirty, dusty things that we do, like taking the Pioneering Women program offline, because for now it's not the thing that I'm going to work on. Now, I still love doing work with those women in that age group, facing those challenges of career and family and relationship, and in a very short period of time. But I don't do it through that group program, and I don't really talk about that to potential clients anymore. Okay, so part of the reason I took the Pioneering Women program offline was because I came up with another group program that I felt somehow met my needs of my business and me at that point a little more tightly. Possibly I pulled back from the Pioneering Women program. Like, I got a bit of flack. That's the most flack I've ever I've got in my career when I first launched that. You can find it on the LinkedIn article about the Pioneering. I think it's called the Pioneering Women of Our Age. It's just a little flack from people, entirely predictable, saying, essentially, what have you got to do? How can you, a man, lead a group of women? And we could have a long conversation about that. Again, kind of predictable that people of a certain viewpoint would find that, I guess the buzzword would be problematic. But there may have been some real stuff for me around that, like some vulnerability and some fear of maybe people just don't want me to do this. Now, looking back, I think that was like resistance, and it was understandable fear or discomfort on my part. But I think really it was not that. It was just about the reason the program didn't take off was because really there wasn't an ecosystem there for it to take off without me putting in quite a lot of energy in terms of invitations and creating new content and that kind of thing. And, my experience of it was real, which was, do I want to run this program, or is there an easier program for me to run, which people will buy into more? So that was part of it. And part of it, also a thing that I'd seen, was that I was worried that a bunch of my early clients, who I absolutely loved working with, a mixture of career changers and people who ran small businesses, just wouldn't have become my clients if my fees had been what they were at this point. I think this point was early 2019. That just people wouldn't have become clients at this point. Some of my favorite people wouldn't have become clients at this point because they wouldn't have made the investment or the commitment. Or because the engagement, a 6-month intense engagement, would have been overkill for them. I don't know if you can hear that on the recording. There's some strange noise, perhaps upstairs or downstairs in my building in the background. So I was worried that these people wouldn't have become clients, and that was just there were some really wonderful people also that I had said no to me, and I'd referred on to other coaches like Katie, who's a guest on episode 1 of this podcast, because she has lower fees than me generally, and does a different kind of work to me. And so, but there were some beautiful people I'd sent on to her, essentially, and who I'd have loved to work with. And I was like, this isn't quite meeting what I want from my business. I don't want to be sending all these people away. Some of them should go to Katie because she'd be a much better service for them than me. But some of them I would do wonderful work with. How can I solve this problem? And I'd been coming around more and more to the idea of zone of genius being important to my work. And so I had the idea that I could have a zone of genius focused group. I called it the Genius Accelerator, and that I might in there be able to put together some career change people, some people who wanted to face leadership challenges but weren't ready for a 6-month one-on-one engagement. It was too big a personal time investment, financial investment, whatever. And I could bring some of the experience of what can be great about group programs from the coach's journey, the things I'd learned from Rich, and put them in this place. So I had this idea, and I hadn't done anything about it until 3 people showed up to be a part, who all fitted those bills, and they were all interested in working with me, all around the same time, mid-2019. So kind of, I think it was May, June, July they showed up. We started September. This must have been 2018, because this is definitely not this year. So it must have been 2018 that I'm talking about, not 2019. So they all showed up at once. And one of the things I definitely took away from that group program with Rich is you can just make this stuff up. And so I made it up. In that moment, I saw the people and I thought, right, I'm going to propose to, I think there were 2 at first and then a third showed up partway through this. I'm going to propose the Zone of Genius group to these people. I'm going to tell them that it's new. I'm going to explain how I think it'll work. I'm going to explain that we'll create it together. And they all said yes. 2 initially, and then a third one joined. And we ran that program for 6 months. Now, what's interesting about this, given what I've just said about the Pioneering Women program, is that 2 of the members of that group, I think if I'd still been running the Pioneering Women program at that point, if I'd wanted to, they would have become members of that group, of the Pioneering Women group. So it's really interesting that as soon as I closed that group, essentially, and started the new one, I got 2 perfect people who fit into that category. And we ended up having those conversations just in a different place. So maybe the name, maybe me doing that and calling it that was too much, Pioneering Women. But I'm so glad I got to do that work with those 2 people in the Zone of Genius group. Anyway, just before these 3 were coming to an end, interestingly, so I didn't quite get to do the overlap. Another person came to join the Zone of Genius group. I was going to join them into that group, and then when I spoke to the members about it, we realized together it won't quite work. It was just too close to the end. Like, we were going to get 2 calls of overlap with kind of cohort 1, and one of those would be wrapping up cohort 1's 6 months of work, and there wouldn't be time to get to know each other. And in the end, I changed my mind and launched a new cohort with the 4th person that had come along. And then partly perhaps because of COVID, partly because of just chance, I ended up just doing that engagement one-on-one with people. And look, if you're going to run group programs in that way, I think you've got to make peace with the idea you might end up running it with one person. Or the alternative would be you just do the work with the one person. You could do a call a month until the second person comes, and that's when the group program starts proper. To throw in another piece of Litvin wisdom, when I run the Coach's Journey enrollment, just to finish off some of the group coaching stuff, I think to finally finish it off in this moment, when I do the Coach's Journey enrollment, I start weekly calls with people who have signed up as soon as they sign up, which means that there's a real incentive for people to sign up and get going. And then I close the doors at some point after everyone who's in the ecosystem has said yes or no, basically, and start the program proper at that point. So it means that the people who sign up early get bonus sessions, which is a nice thing to offer. And you can play with that in all kinds of ways. Brilliant. So, time for me to take a breath before coming back to talk more about the criteria I use for new kinds of work, and as an example for that, using the one-on-one engagement that I just created this autumn. I was just thinking on my little break, I should have got someone else in to interview me about this. I feel like it's a lot harder work doing a monologue than it is having a conversation. Isn't that interesting? Maybe it's just that it's kind of 4:20 p.m. and I need a cup of tea or something to eat. So when I sat down to make this episode, before I sat down to make it, actually, because I've been procrastinating on making this for about 3 weeks, I could tell resistance is at work. When I sat down, like, 3 criteria for how I make work kind of fell out easily. And they are, do I love it? Right? Is it a part of my zone of genius in that way? And, you could hear that in the, like, where the coach's journey came from, right? It's from those conversations with coaches. The Genius Accelerator came from, there are these people that I absolutely love working with, and they're not working with me now because my one-on-one work is too expensive. How can I do this work that I love? And I also tested that, right, with the coach's journey. It's like, do I love working with coaches in a group? If not, I shouldn't launch a group program. And luckily I loved it enough, or I got enough of that excited feeling, and I could kind of feel my nerves with the other part. And the second one is, does it meet a need? So the first criteria is, do I love it? The second criteria is, does it meet a need that I can really feel or see? And with the coach's journey, again, it's like there was this need for... there was this need from coaches for content from me, or like there was this appetite for it at least, and it felt like there was a need because I could see a lot of other coaches I knew not having businesses that were running as smoothly or as successfully as mine. Not that mine has been totally smooth or successful by any stretch of the imagination. I certainly don't make hundreds of thousands of pounds or anything like that. But I did have a business that supported me more than my previous work. My previous work was in the UK charity sector. Draw from that what you want. I'm definitely making tens of thousands and not hundreds of thousands of pounds. And again, I could really feel the need with the Pioneering Women program, right? I could just see it. It was like these 4 amazing, inspiring women reaching this kind of crunch point in their life, and just what a difference it would make to them if I could have brought those 4 brilliant women together. And again, the Zone of Genius group, like the need that I saw in the world there was a little different. So at that point, I'd kind of had this... I'd seen the futurist Jordan Hall talk about how he felt we as a race could deal with existential level threat. And what he said was, he'd been thinking about this for a decade, and that really it's about I'm paraphrasing massively here, but what I saw is it's about understanding the unique place that you can contribute, I can contribute to the world because of my experience and my genes and what I love to do and all that kind of thing, and finding the place where the world needs that. And that's the zone of genius. And only when we do that can we be sure that we're doing everything to make sure the world is better, and to make sure we deal with the potential catastrophes that humans are facing in the modern world. And he has another piece which is more about becoming our higher selves, or what he calls sovereign, and that's what the book The Power to Choose, which I'm working on, is about. But that first part is about the zone of genius, and so I could kind of feel that the world needs that. I could see that people need that, because often that's what they're asking when they want to change career. People want to be doing work that they love and that they're good at and that contributes to the world. So I could see again the need there. And with the group programs as well, I guess the other part of it was that I'm always asking myself, is it good for my business? Is it good for me being able to continue doing this work that I love, making my business sustainable, and everything like that? And those group programs were good for that. They potentially were extra income. They potentially were both more income for me than one-on-one work, although group program definitely takes more energy than a one-on-one client, whilst making it more accessible to other people, which is important to me as part of my work. And then, but what I realized more recently is there is definitely a fourth part of all this, which even I, who kind of do constantly try and remind myself of it, sometimes forget, which is this new part of my business good for my life? And one of the really nice things that I think is in the book, The Prosperous Coach, is, I think this is from that, otherwise it's something that I've heard Rich say, is that a prosperous coach builds understands the life they want and then builds a business to support that, rather than vice versa. Because most of us, that's part of the end goal that we want from our work anyway, is to support us to have the life we want. But we need to start doing it now. And so I need to remind myself always to ask, is this new business idea good for my life? It's not always, right? Because we can put I can put a lot of energy into the Coach's Journey group program. And if that makes my January, February, March really stressful and strained, then it's not necessarily good for my life. This year, for example, coming up, my wife is having a baby. We're having a baby in January. I'm not going to be doing that enrollment of the Coach's Journey group program because it's not good for my life to be doing it whilst I've got, as long as nothing goes wrong, touch wood, some little person that needs my attention, and I want to give my attention there. So that's the fourth thing we've got to ask. Is it good for our lives? Do I love it? Does it meet a need in the world? Is it good for the ongoing success of my business, being sustainable, enabling me to do work that I love? And is it good for my life? And you don't have to ask them in that order, but those are definitely the questions to ask. And then just to give another example of me using that, my one-on-one practice has been much more quiet this year. Now, I don't know why that is. There's a bunch of reasons that might be. Partly, I think my energy for my business has been low because of some stuff that's happened in my personal life in the last couple of years. I think dealing with some grief really I think that took some energy, some of the kind of enthusiasm and energy I've often had for my business out of me while I've been dealing with that. Some of it may be coincidence, some of it may be COVID-19. But I was sitting kind of end of June or July thinking, I've got kind of a free autumn. What shall I do with that? And then I had an idea, which is, again, partly coming from this place of, particularly in COVID-19, like I wonder if there's a group of people who want to do some coaching but don't have the kind of money now. One of the things I've noticed during coronavirus is it feels like a much bigger ask to ask people to commit the kind of money that I currently ask, which is like £4,000 or £5,000 to do a 6-month engagement, and so then 8,000 or 9,000 to do a 12-month engagement. Like that's a bigger amount of money for the people I'm speaking to because of the uncertainty that's around. So I felt like I was missing out on working with some great people. So like, is that good for my business? And is there a need there? Well, it would be good for my business to work with people I'd love to work with. I'd love that. And there's a need for coaching here, which my current engagements are not meeting. And for my business, I've got this space. And then is there a need in my life? Well, I need some money so that I can take time off to be with my baby. And so here we've got a problem that needs solving. And the way that, I love solving a problem. The reason I've got these 4 criteria is because I love it when you can find one thing to solve 4 problems. Or you can find one thing which takes advantage of 4 opportunities, or a mixture of those things. And I just wondered, what it'd be like to run a short engagement again. Like just that people could start in September and finish by Christmas. So then the fee can be lower than my normal one-on-one work. And it might work for the people that have been knocking around a while that I love working with but haven't been back to work with me recently. And it might work for the people that I've spoken to this year where the investment of a normal 6 or 12-month engagement was too much. And I don't really want to do any 6-month engagements right now because I'm going to be taking time off for Christmas and then time off for paternity leave. So what if I create a new engagement? And then you get to be creative. It's like, if I was going to create a new engagement that started in September and finished before Christmas, what would it look like? How would it be? How can I make it really exciting and powerful? Because I have some doubts, right, over short-term coaching. That's why I don't offer it or haven't offered it for a few years. So why am I offering it now? And then I had to think about that. And I thought, well, there's a few tools, a few bits of coaching technology that I can bring in now around really getting into the why of people and what would make a difference to them between now and the end of their life, making the topic really focused and bringing in a sense of practice that I learned as part of a training I did this year, and how practice is vital. So then I can create an engagement and I can put it out to people. And what I did, just so that you know how I do these things, I thought of the kind of 5 or 6 people that I've spoken to, either as they've been clients or they've been almost clients. And I thought, and I wrote to them and I said, look, I've got this idea. Do you want to speak about it? It might not be right for you at all. It might be great. From that, I had kind of 2 who were really interested but didn't decide to do it, and 1 who ended up signing up. So there's 1 client created. Then I put it out to my mailing list. And actually from that, I think we might end up with, I felt like I probably had capacity for 4 or maybe max 5. And I think I might end up with 4 or maybe max 5. So I'm really surprised by that, I should say. That's the first time I've ever created clients by just sending a message to my email list. We'll see when I speak to those people exactly how that pans out and exactly whether it's the right thing for them. But just to give you a sense, again, we've got this idea that, do I love the idea of doing this engagement? Does it meet a need I can see or feel? So do I love it? Well, I'm going to make it so I love it. And we'll get to that again in a sec. Does it meet a need I can see or feel? Well, there are these people that at the moment don't feel able to commit £4,000, £5,000 to coaching, but maybe they would commit £1,800, £1,900, £2,000. Let's see. And they definitely want coaching. They've told me that, and I can trust and believe them. Is it good for my business? Well, yes. I've got capacity to do some one-on-one work. And, my coaching, I'm always more energized in my business when I'm coaching people I love to coach. And so getting 2 or 3 more of those will make a massive difference to my business. And also, is it good for my life? Well, yes, because I need to be able to take off this time next year. That's the most important thing to me. And is it good for my life? Well, I'm a better person to be around. I enjoy my life more when my work is going well. So if I can create a client or 2, and it was really interesting to see that as that started to happen for the first time in a while, I hadn't had a new one-on-one client, probably only had like 1 this year. And actually that was the person who was supposed to be a member of the Genius Accelerator group, but ended up just being 1 person. So that's like quite a long time. And apart from that is some really beautiful associate work that I do, which is slightly different, feels like a slightly different thing. But as soon as I started creating these new clients in my business, my feeling in my life changed. I just had more energy. I was, there's just it really felt like that beautiful metaphor that I think I learned from, who knows who this is from? Maybe my brother, maybe Fred Kaufman. He'll like being, Ewan might like being confused with Fred. I think I've heard them both say different things. Like, money is the lifeblood of the business. It's not the point of the business, but if you don't have any lifeblood in your business, it's really hard to have energy to do things. And I just really felt that this autumn when these new clients first started working with me. And I should say also, I was then able, once I'd pitched this idea out to a couple of people, I had someone show up just on my radar through the referral, ecosystem that is out there, kind of referral critical mass rolling, who this was a great engagement for. So I was able to propose this engagement to that person too. So that tells you, again, brings to life, I hope, these 4 criteria. Do I love it? Does it meet a need I can see or feel? Is it good for my business? And is it good for my life? And that brings us to these questions applied to the Coach's Journey podcast, this part of my business, and some other thoughts I've been having, which I'm going to get to after this little short jingle. And by the time, again, I've had a little drink and collected my thoughts. Okay. It's really interesting to notice how telling stories is easy in this podcast, and for some reason talking about what's coming up feels a little harder. So that's interesting in itself, and let's see how that goes. Essentially what this brings me to is the last 9 months or so, particularly, perhaps slightly longer than that, perhaps some of that was there when I first launched the podcast. And in some ways I could and perhaps should another time retell the story of the podcast along those 4 questions. What I've discovered, though, from a year of the podcast, which it pretty much is now, is that I really like having the conversations. I discovered I don't love editing and writing the marketing for the podcast. So what I've done to make it manageable so that I can keep making this podcast is delegate some of that work. to a copywriter and an editor, and it's made the whole thing. I do love having these conversations with amazing people. I even love making this thing, having a conversation with Audacity, or you, of course, but really with myself. So I do really love making this podcast, and there's a problem for me in my business. So do I love it? Yes. Is there a need? Yes. One of the reasons that I made the podcast was because I just realized it didn't really exist. Now, actually, it kind of does. There are a few ones that I've come across as time goes on. You should check them out. Jamie Smart has one that he mentioned for coaches. There's one called, I think, This Coaching Life, which is worth checking this out. There's even a couple of guests like Kathy Breslin that have been on both. And at some point, I'll get around to inviting Phil, who's the host of that, onto the show. I haven't sent him an invite yet, but he's on my list next. So, but there is a need. Like, lots of people have written to me to tell me that they really like this podcast. But the question is it good for my business? And the answer at the moment is I'm not quite sure. Especially with the costs of the editor and the copywriter. It's costing me quite a lot of money every year. Like, not an enormous amount, but given the time that I put in as well, it's not an insignificant investment. So there's a question, which I'm sitting with. I also got a really interesting thing happen last year, so that's like a really practical analysis of the podcast along those lines. That had a really interesting and more qualitative thing happen. Enrolling the Coach's Journey group program in 2020, which is 3, maybe 4, I can't remember exactly, people who were kind of in conversation with me about. And I talked about this a little bit at the end of the podcast episode with Toku McCree. He asked me some great questions, and this kind of came out, and then I was like, it needs a bit more explanation. So it's just partly why we're here, but and also partly why there's a little postscript on that episode. So let's say there were 4 people who might have joined the Coach's Journey program, and they decided to join they decided to get their coaching instead from guests of the podcast, and that got me kind of annoyed. Because, and it's worth saying this, because it is important that you know this, right? That I operate from a spirit of generosity. And I know that my higher self and me at my absolute best knows that, look, if they have chosen to work with a different coach than me, that's amazing. And every guest I've had on the podcast is an amazing coach. And anyone who goes off and chooses to work with them over me is making a great decision. And I'm really happy if I was part of connecting you. Like, I know that on a high level. And then on a ego level, it's really upsetting, because how does my business work if I'm giving away all my clients? And what if the group program can't continue to run because too many people go off and work with whoever it is, whether it's Marianne or Katie or Marsha or Jamie or any of these amazing guests that we've had on the show who do great work with coaches. Now, on the highest level, you should go and do that. If you're really attracted to working with Jamie or Chris, who's coming up in an episode, or Katie or Marianne or anyone else, please go and do that. They're amazing. Don't feel guilty about it by any means. And I knew that wasn't the thing that I wanted, right? I didn't want those people to feel guilty and work with me out of obligation or guilt. So what is the signal in the noise of my stress and frustration about these people working with other people? That's the question that I'm often asking. What about my feeling and my reaction here is useful? And what came up for me when I asked that question was something that Seth Godin says in his book. I think it's in This Is Marketing. I did his marketing seminar, which is a really interesting learning experience, and made some great connections on there. That generosity doesn't always mean free. And there's then a question that came up for me, which is, how is it, I actually ask a lot of my clients, for the Coach's Journey this year, it was £2,000, or more if paid in installments. That's a lot of money for some people. For some people listening, that'll seem like a tiny amount of money. For others, it feels like a big amount of money. People can have a lot from me for free, right? They can have the podcast, they can come to the intro calls, and that's all as a gift from me, and I'm totally happy to be generous about that. Or they can pay me $2,000. Now, I know that the $2,000 is an important part of the commitment. Paying a fee for coaching, paying it up front, paying it for us, giving yourself that kind of investment. These are all really amazing gifts we can give to our clients. And there was something ungenerous about what I was doing, and I kind of spotted that. Because if people all of those people may have been perfectly served by going and working with somebody else who they've heard of on the program, mostly with Katie Harvey. And, if that's perfect, if that's why. But what if they're doing that because they can't afford a £2,000 investment, or they're not able to make that commitment to themselves? And Katie makes it really easy for them by making it a £300 investment, which renews every month. Like, really interesting business model, different to mine. There's a competition there going on, which is quite interesting. It's making me innovate. That's all good. It's making me think, is there something else I want to offer? And it made me realize there's something not very generous of me about forcing those people to choose between nothing with me, or those few gifts, or working with someone else, or a £2,000 investment. And it just has, since then, that has been in the back of my mind as one of these problems. It's like, we're going to get to in a minute that what I think might be the elegant solution to all these problems. So the first problem I'm facing is, how do I pay for this podcast in the long term? How do I make it sustainable for my business? The second is, there's these people that might really want to work with me, but because of my pricing, they're kind of driven to somebody else. And if they would love to work with me, maybe I need to find a way for them to do that. And there's something about the coach's journey enrollment process. And Toku McCree, again, in that episode, he talks about his program, the Samurai Coaching Dojo. If you're interested in that, again, I think Toku, if you haven't listened to that episode, it's an amazing episode. He's a really interesting guy for all kinds of reasons. He brings a lot of depth and rigor to his work and to coaching. I think I'm really glad he's in the industry, as I am all the guests that I've had on the show. But Toku talked about the killing himself by doing the prosperous coach approach for group programs. And there's a sense of that for me. So I have this problem, which is I find the enrollment process for the coach's journey, as I've been doing it, quite attritional. It's quite something to take the punishment of lots and lots of no's all at once, even for me, even after 5 years of practicing. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing in that enrollment process that isn't my zone of genius. Again, asking those questions. So do I love it? Do I love the enrollment process of the coach's journey? No. Okay. Now, one solution to that is to delegate that, and given different personal circumstances, that might be there. But there is a problem there to be solved at some point in some way. Then there's another problem, which is that I'm having a baby in January. So the Coach's Journey group program will not be happening in its normal slot, which is kind of March start, September finish, because it takes a couple of months of run-up, and I'm not going to be able to do that because beautiful baby Swale is due 11th of Jan, or 10th of Jan, depending on whether you're doing it by scan. And I've forgotten which it is. Don't tell Emma. Or the baby when it's born, that I forgot when it was due. So that's another problem, right? I'm not going to be running the Coach's Journey group program in its normal slot, and I'm sitting with that. And there's all these beautiful coaches who I love working with, who love what I'm making, and I'm not going to be able to serve them, at least in the first half of next year. And I've got a load of questions. You've heard me asking them in this episode already about affordability of coaching. What do I think about that? Mostly throughout my journey, I've been completely happy to gift people a lot, for that to be what makes my work accessible. If you come to me and you want to coach with me, and I think there might be a potential, then I'll gift you at least 2 hours. Is how I've operated for the last few years, and often 3 or 4 hours. And that's how I know that I'm giving and that I'm supporting people. And that some of my work is expensive because I give a lot as part of that. And you get a lot. And some of it is free, and that's generous. And there's, of course, as I've said, this other kind of generosity. But I am always thinking, what do I think about the affordability of my work? What do I think about what I offer? And so that's a question that I've got here, particularly for coaches, right? How do I put this? It's I want to be giving to the world of coaching. £2,000 intense 6-month program is perfect for some people. Again, it's not perfect for everyone. And these aren't, you can hear how these ands and these different problems that I'm trying to solve are overlapping. And there's something that I've been being called to. It first arose when I was doing the marketing seminar, Seth Godin's program. there's a sense of me wanting to create community. And so that's here too. And last of all, I guess I'm checking in. Is there still a need for me to provide something for coaches? I don't know as part of that, but what I do know is there is a need for real, true, authentic support for coaches and communities of coaches who want to do that, so that they can see what it's really like in the world of coaching, and so that they can feel so they can feel what it's like to make this into a real business that can support real people, not this kind of get rich quick madness that's out there in the world. Like, if you want to get rich quick, don't become a coach. It's hard work, and you have to put yourself through things. It's a growth process having a business, and we need to keep sharing that message. And all that brings us to the new way of working with me, the new way of supporting this podcast that I want to share as part of this episode. Okay, so from now on, there is an opportunity to support the coach's journey, the podcast, but also my wider work supporting coaches. I should say at this stage, the podcast will always be free, will never be behind a paywall. The interviews will be available as they are now in full to anyone who wants access to them. If you believe in that as a good thing, you might just want to support the podcast, or you might want to give back to me, but no one should feel obliged to do that. This is really just if you can afford it, and if you want to support the Coach's Journey podcast. It will mean a lot to me. I'm sure I'll do a little celebration, the first ones that come in, if indeed any ever come in. And there are a bunch of reasons you might want to do that, as you can imagine. You love the podcast, you really value what it gives, you want to be a part of it in some way, or you just believe it should exist. And really that's why I want to keep doing this work. Yes, I love it, and that's partly why, but also, do I believe there is a need for the podcast? Absolutely, and I want to make it a contribution to the coaching industry to support coaches to run their businesses and do their work in the right way. Now, at this stage, there are going to be 3 levels of supporter available for you, 3 levels of support that you can give. And I should say, like I've kind of hinted at it throughout this episode, but as well as those 4 questions, how I make work is in an agile launch before you're ready, ignore and battle through your resistance way, which means that here's how it's going to start, but we will create how this works going forward together and based on what you want and based on what I can give. So at the start, there are going to be 3 levels of supporter. So the first level, let's call it gold, because no one who gives money is anything deserving of anything other than a gold medal, would be just giving £5 a month, and that's obviously to feel like you're a part of this thing that we're making together. But also, what I'll do is you'll get at that point advance notice of future guests, and a monthly patrons only video update. And the reasons I decided to do those things is those are things I'd love to give to people and I think would be really fun for people to receive. So there's also a, let's call it diamond level supporter. And that means you get everything at the gold level, but you also get thanked by name on an episode when you become a supporter. And that's available if you want to give £10 a month. And then the top level, if I have no idea if anyone will ever sign up to this, like it's completely up to you, of course. It's there in case anyone is feeling really generous, would be to give £50 a month. Absolute hero if you do that. And you get everything at the previous levels, thanked when you become a supporter, video update, notice of future guests. You also get the chance to submit questions for future guests, which I'll bring in if I can. I won't promise to do that because the main thing here is to create the absolute best episode. But you get the chance to submit questions for future guests, and I'll use them if I possibly can, and also get thanked on every episode while you're a patron, because at that level that's serious support. Now, at this point, I should say, what will I do with this money? So the first thing is I'll use it to cover the cost of making the episodes. Now, that varies a little bit from episode to episode. This one's less because I'm going to edit it, because it's just as easy for me to do that, really, as getting Ro to do it. That's where it'll go first: editing and copy, and the ongoing costs like the website, all that kind of thing. And then when there's more money, I'd love to put some money into marketing the podcast so it can reach further and wider and support more coaches. And also, as soon as possible, potentially do more episodes, because it makes sense, and maybe one day I get some money. But that's not really what it's about. It's about supporting this so that I'm not losing out, so that we can get this, create more of this content and get it out to more people. So those are the reasons you might want to become a supporter, and you might want to become a supporter only, because we'll get onto the second part of this in a sec. If actually you don't want coaching support from me right now, you just want to support this thing, and if you do that, I will be so touched. And I've got no idea if that'll happen. We'll play with this, and this is the start of where you can get involved. If you would love to pay a different amount, if there's something else that you think I might be able to give you that you'd love to get, by all means reach out, let me know. All the details, I should say, at this stage of this will be available via the Coach's Journey. If you press the support link at the top of the page, thecoachesjourney.com, and press the support link, or the link will be in the show notes. There's a little video, it'll be on Patreon. There's a little video of me explaining it there, as well as all of it being in writing. Okay, so that's if you want to become a supporter of the podcast, of the Coach's Journey. The second part, the second offer, is to not only support the podcast, but also become a member of the Coach's Journey community. Now, that sounds quite grand. I'll explain what it means in a sec. In the long term, who knows what that becomes? But this is me launching early, seeing where we get to, seeing if I love this, seeing if it meets a need, and all those kinds of things. And essentially the way this will work is, from now on, there will be the option to join regular Coach's Journey community calls. There will be 10 calls a year, and you can sign up for different levels to get access to different numbers of those calls. On each call, it'll be a mixture of me doing the things that I always do, which when I'm working with coaches is group coaching, it's mentoring, it's telling my story, it's bringing everything I've got, getting as close to my zone of genius I can to support whoever's on the call. So there's mentoring and supervision, there's coaching, there's teaching, there's opportunities to ask me questions. Not everyone will get coached every time. That's how it works, potentially. But potentially everyone does get coached every time, because I have a suspicion that at the start of this, there will be the cheapest one-on-one coaching I have offered for many years, because there will be very few people signed up. Let's see how we get on with that. Now, this is for coaches who like what I have to say and have to offer, and would like my support with their coaching, with their business, with their lives. Those who have been on group calls with me before know that I ask commitments from the people on the calls, to honesty, to vulnerability, to courage. But it can be an exciting place to be. And one of the things I love about the Coach's Journey work that I do, the group coaching work that I do, is bringing together groups of coaches. And even on those intro calls for the Coach's Journey, I've heard stories of people who met there, having follow-up calls afterwards, even I think months and months later. So there's a real opportunity to meet other coaches, and this can be a lonely piece, a lonely way of working, and it can be difficult. And the other thing that comes from group work with coaches is realizing we're not alone, we're not going mad. Other people are struggling with things too, and the gift of the community calls can be to see that. And also the gift of the community calls, what I love about doing group work with coaches is, if you've got a bunch of coaches there asking different questions, bringing different parts of their lives, of their work to the calls, then we're doing coaching on all those things. And so everyone is getting coaching whenever I'm working with one person. But also, in a short amount of time, we can touch on most of the things that coaches face, and get some work and some perspective on all of those things. So this is partly about affordable coaching. It's partly about connecting to others. And it's partly about just that thing that communities have the power to do, which is show us that we're not alone, inspire us, drive us on to do more, look after us so that we don't drive ourselves beyond what we're capable of. And all of that will be my aim for the Coach's Journey community calls. And to have a lot of fun. And one of my favorite bits of feedback from one of the first coaches who joined the Coach's Journey group program is like things that she took away was I laughed a lot, even though we were talking about serious things. So the first thing to say about what you get as a community member is that you get everything people on equivalent levels as a supporter get. So you get access to the monthly supporters up there. You get advance notice of guests. If you're at a high enough level, you get to ask questions and that kind of thing too. And then the way the membership of the Coach's Journey community will work is like this. Every year, there will be 10 group coaching community calls. If you become a full member, which costs you £90 per month, you will have access to all 10 of those calls, plus you will have 2 one-on-one coaching sessions with me every year. And they'll come at months 3 and 9 of your membership. And when I sat down and I thought, what is the engagement and involvement over a year that I can give that I think will both meet the need, so not as intense as the Coach's Journey group program, but significant enough in a way to really support people who want to take their business to the next level, who want to grow their business, who want to be challenged and supported, and also learn from me. And I think that 10 monthly group coaching calls plus 2 one-on-one calls has the potential to have a really big impact for coaches who love my work and who would love to have that close work with me. It gets both the sense of and the real benefits of group coaching, and it gets some one-on-one time with me, because receiving one-on-one coaching is different to group coaching. I've talked about the ways that you learn an enormous amount as a coach from group coaching programs. You learn much faster about all the different challenges that you as a coach face, and there's something special about one-on-one time, and I wanted to give some of that. And 10 calls a year is so that this can also support my life, because my plan is I took most of August off this year. I'm going to again next year. I'm going to be taking a month off for paternity leave next year. And in the future, I'd like to take a month off around Christmas or in the new year every year. So this allows me to fit this. It's like, does this support my life? Yes. So that's full membership of the Coach's Journey community, and that's £90 a month. But remember that a part of this is about making coaching really accessible and giving people a way to engage with me and my work in a bigger way than the free ways I offer. But for some people, even £90 a month is a lot of money. And, my feeling would be that for members who become full members, we can create from that, enough money it'll be kind of, I should say actually, because I'm charging through Patreon, they charge VAT. On everything, all contributions. So that's why the charge is £90. So for you, it'll be, depending on where you are in the world, it'll probably be £100, £110. And my feeling would be that for the roughly £1,200 a year that you'll be paying for a full membership, we will definitely be able to increase the size of your coaching business by £1,200 if you take the insights from the calls and apply them and take action in the world. And I'm confident that we can do that. But not everyone's in the place where they can commit to £90 a month. And a part of this is about creating really accessible opportunities to work with me. And my feeling is that the way to do that is by the other 2 levels of community membership. So if you're a gold community member, neither of these 2 get access to one-on-one coaching, but they both get access to some of the community coaching calls. If you're a gold member, you pay £9 a month plus VAT, and you get access to 2 community coaching calls a year. And if you are a diamond member, you get, for £18 a month plus VAT, access to 4 community coaching calls a year, so 1 a quarter. Look, that's a way to engage with this, and I've got a suspicion that at the early stages there will definitely be some cheap one-on-one coaching with me, because who knows who's going to sign up at this stage. And at each call, there will be the chance to be coached by me, potentially mentored by me, learn from me, but also be connected with a bunch of other coaches. And the way that'll work is there'll be 2 calls a year, which community members at all levels will be on. So the gold members, the diamond members, and the full members will all be there. There'll be another 2 calls a year where it's just the diamond members and the full members, and then there'll be 6 calls where it's just the full members. And again, for those early full members, it might just be me and you. Yeah, and I should probably add that I should have said when we were talking about the supporters that those charges for the supporters, there will be VAT on top of that. Unfortunately, it's an annoying thing about Patreon and their negotiations with the EU that even though I don't charge VAT personally, so I get no benefit from this, Patreon do, and that's the way the law works, depending on where you are. So it's worth saying that. There's a bit more about that and answers to a bunch of other questions about how this law work on the Patreon page, which you can find by going to thecoachesjourney.com and clicking on support there, or searching Patreon for The Coach's Journey. Or it's at patreon.com/thecoachesjourney. I could just say that. And that includes, for example, one of the questions that someone asked when I shared this idea in draft form with them is, well, of course, they first said, does this mean the podcast is going to be going to have to pay for it? And the answer again is no. They also asked, what happens if I just like sign up, get one of the group calls and then cancel? And it's like, that's perfect. You can do that, right? There's no offer here to try this work before you sign up, but hopefully because of the low investment level at the start, that potentially £9 plus VAT to join as a community member at the gold level, you can try it. And if you come to the first call and you don't like it, you can leave, and no hard feelings, right? Because it'll already have been a generous contribution that you've made. And the same goes for all the other levels. When you leave, obviously you lose the access to the benefits that you had, but part of coaching is that it starts sometimes and it finishes sometimes, and that's true of this community membership too. And look in the future, I hope that this community might grow into something much more. As I might have said already, I don't know what it'll come to be, but I'm excited by the idea of bringing together some wonderful coaches that I already know well and some that I don't, and seeing where we all get to. Yeah, and I should say that my aim is to do one call of each type before my paternity leave. So we will have a November call, a December call, and a January call. The calls, my plan at the moment is that they'll take place 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. UK time, which makes them accessible to people in the States, but it also means that people who have day jobs can get back hopefully in time, or leave a bit early, or stop a bit early because most people are still working at home. And it means that people who no one's also on a call too late. That's the call slot I like to use. Of course, it's not perfect for everyone, and there'll be some people for whom that just doesn't work, and I am sorry about that. There will be recordings of the calls for the ones that you can't make. But my intention would be there'll be one which we'll have before I go on paternity leave. And I say intention because who knows when the baby comes, but there will be one for everyone, all community members. There'll be one for just the diamond and full members, and there'll be one for just the full members before I go off. And then we'll start up again in February, March, and we'll make sure we fit the rest of the 2021 calls in. And you'll be able to find the dates of the upcoming calls at coachesjourney.com/community. I'll try and keep that up to date so that that if you want to sign up, you want to when you'll get your next call. And I'm really excited to see what happens. Like I say, launch before you're ready. I've got no idea what the take-up will be. I suspect, like I say, that if you join at the £10 level now, you might get like a call next month with me getting some brilliant and very affordable one-on-one coaching. Similarly, probably at every level. There's loads of pricing for you to think about. So I've no idea how it'll play out. We'll play with it. If you've got suggestions, send them in. Suggestions from people who are already signed up, supporters or community members, will be listened to much more carefully than the rest of you plebs. No, I'm joking, of course. Love to hear suggestions if there's like a benefit or a member level that you're really interested in, or you think this is a great idea or a terrible idea. I'd love to hear from you. And as as a coach to another coach, really, because there's so much interesting pricing stuff here for you to think about, really notice how you respond to that. Because remember, how you respond to this is how your clients will be responding inside to every kind of out there suggestion you make. So notice, would you rather there was just one thing that you could buy? Are you happy that there's 5? Like, what attracts you? Is it like the low price and just some really bargainous coaching? Or is it getting really involved with me, with the community, getting to meet everyone who's involved? Like, there's so much here for you to think about. It could also be that you at first start thinking, yeah, I really want to be part of this. I really want to be a community member. And then you realize you don't want to work with me. And that's perfect. It might be that you end up as a supporter or something different. Any of these things are, of course, amazing and really interesting. And look, I hope that as you hear this, remembering what we're tying this together to in this episode, you can hear how this solves all those problems potentially elegantly in one go. There's a generosity in pricing here. There's a chance for people to be engaged at almost exactly the level of investment they want to give and the level of commitment they want to give over the course of a year. Potentially it solves my podcasting funding problem and helps me pay for the editing and the copy so that I can keep these going, maybe even bring out more episodes. Potentially it shows me what it's like to create a community, at first community for coaches, but who knows in the future what it'll help me develop in the other parts of my work. It'll hopefully give me the chance to serve some amazing coaches, to make it affordable and give coaches the real, ordinary, authentic support that hopefully is what my work always brings. And it enables me to keep working with coaches, to keep supporting the coaching world, even when I am a dad, because I have no idea what's going to happen for me post January. I have no idea what I'll feel like, whether I'll desperately still want to do that slightly attritional enrollment for the Coach's Journey group program, but I know that I will love. Right, here we're back to those questions. I know I will love hosting group coaching sessions with a community of amazing coaches. I know I will love making those videos for the supporters. I know I will love getting questions in from supporters for guests. I know I will. I feel like there's a need for this podcast, and I feel like there may be a need for this kind of coaching community. But we'll see that. That's in a way the question that I know the least about the answer to, but that I'm testing. Is it good for my business? Well, it potentially could be. It enables me to keep doing this thing that I really enjoy doing, creating these podcasts. But it does it without the rest of my business having to support this. And potentially I make more money. Potentially I make more connections. Like, it won't escape clever people like you that potentially this is a feeder into the group program in future for people who want that more intense engagement with me and some of the more structured stuff like the weekly reporting around that. And is it good for my life? Well, yes, because it enables me to hopefully keep doing this even when there is a little Swale in the house. So, look, it's been a mammoth conversation with just me here. Like, I hope you've taken loads away from it. Because there's no one here asking me any questions, like, I would love it if you wanted to send in questions about the group program, about how I create things that pique your interest that you didn't I didn't answer. Maybe, for all I know, when I'm doing an interview, I'm quite often catching the things that people say they reference, and to make sure we come back to them. I haven't been doing that today. No one's been doing it for me. So send all that stuff in, and I might do another episode answering a load of questions about group programs and creating new programs for clients and all that kind of thing. And of course, like, if you really value this podcast and this work that I'm doing, that we are doing together, me and you, and the coaching world, then please, if you feel able, perhaps join the community, perhaps become a supporter. And if you don't feel able to do that, but you want to express some support, the best ways to do it are, it's absolutely amazing when, I hear that the podcast has been referred to someone. It's really beautiful when there are ratings and reviews. I read a couple of new 5-star reviews on iTunes recently. I think not that recently, but in the last couple of months, and was really touched by them. It's so nice that people take the time to do that. So by all means, do that. Whatever you can do to help support the podcast, I will really appreciate. And other than that, until next time.